Hey folks, thanks for joining us today. This is Dr. Emily Scherning with American Resiliency. This week we're exploring the inland Pacific Northwest. That's the third of our big three destination regions. This is the third and final destination cities video where we're exploring places you might want to move if you're currently in an area with a particularly rough climate outlook, but you want to make sure your destination has access to employment opportunities, decent health care, other urban infrastructure. If you love the outdoors, this destination region might be the most appealing bet of the three. Although, there are plenty of great recreation opportunities in the Northeast, the Northern Midwest, the inland Pacific Northwest is unique in that the future climate, the 2050 climate, is projected to extend the length and the quality of the outdoor recreation season. The shoulder season there is expected to lengthen by a couple of weeks on either end. That was a surprising fact for me to read. But the park services, both national and state level park services, as I was reviewing adaptation plans in the region, both are quite serious about this potential upside for the region. They're preparing for recreational expansion, they're beefing up park services for that expanded shoulder season, and they're working to increase access to water recreation for the warmer summers the region is anticipating, which we'll see that in some more detail. So you got a positive factor in this region that might be unexpected. Before we get into the cities, I want to state the major regional threat, which is fire and the resulting air quality problems. Many of the cities I'm going to explore with you are not in higher wildfire risk areas, but the air quality issues are a serious statewide concern. If you're considering resilience in this area, budget for good air filtration systems in the home. As we explore the inland Pacific Northwest, we're going to start in what would some call the capital of the Palouse, the big, wonderful agricultural region there with a lot of resilience potential. Let's check out Spokane, Washington. So we'll go and look at that on the climate maps first so that you can get a little bit of your basic information. Let's go check that out. So like usual, we're going to use the USDA plant hardiness zones and the heat zone map. Right now, we're looking at plant hardiness zones. And we're going to look at the regional transformation here. I actually had it on 2050 when we got started. Now, look, I've knocked it back. Did you see any difference? There isn't hardly any, right? We're going to see, unfortunately, a bigger change in the region as we move towards 2050 under our most likely climate future. For just a second, we're looking at the big view. A major heat up here in the inland Pacific Northwest. Many of the cities that we're going to check out today, they kind of skirt that difference, only looking at a 2 or 3 week heat up over 86. So long, mild season, not huge increase to the hot season. If we look in Spokane, check that out. We'll go back and forth. Right now, it's sort of peach and mint, right? When we look at 2050, going back to contemporary, it only gets about a month over 86 in contemporary data. So as we look towards the future, we're seeing like a 6-week heat up, which is pretty extreme. However, I think that this city has really good resilience potential because it is in a fairly small part of the inland Pacific Northwest that is looking at increased spring-winter precipitation that is a statistically significant trend. So although that heat up is going to increase the overall drying trend in the region, having the opportunity to maximize water capture in those winter spring storms, that's going to be very beneficial. Before I say more good things about Spokane and the surrounding region, I do want to take just a second to make some cultural notes. So looking back at the SPLC hate map, just as a very general, like how much trouble are you going to get in any particular region, we can see the inland Pacific Northwest is shaded kind of a medium red. Darker than we see in some of the states in the Northeast, much darker than we saw in the Midwest. We see reasonably high levels of affiliation with hate groups in both Oregon and Washington, the states that we're talking about today. And we do see that Spokane itself is on the map. And I think it's worth noting that it's close to this dense area of hate groups here in northern Idaho. We do have a problem with white supremacist hate groups in this region. And, they're not just talk here. When you talk about what people are doing, there's increasing evidence that we are dealing with hate groups that are working to attack the power grid. This is happening now. This is an article from local news about electrical attacks in the Pacific Northwest. We can see NPR is covering it very recently. There was a story in the news just yesterday. I'm recording on February 7th here that more white supremacist hate groups were attacking the power grid around Baltimore. So now we're seeing East Coast attacks as well. It's worth knowing in advance that there is this additional destabilizing force right now, not attacking the inland Pacific Northwest, mostly attacking the mountains to the west of there. But we're talking about there are people in this region who want to bring more destabilizing energy to society. I feel like we got enough destabilizing energy heading our way. Let's not add to our problems. So none of the other cities we're looking at are on the hate map. And I don't want to act like this is Spokane's problem. This is a regional problem. It's a very decentralized problem, the hate groups in the Pacific Northwest. I would be wanting to know about this in advance, that there's groups active in the region, that I'm not just worried about attacks on individuals. We're talking about concern for planned attacks to disrupt infrastructure, to disrupt society. But let's get back to talking about Spokane because it is cool. It's a vibrant art scene in the area. On climate resilience, they're a highly climate aware city. I'm going to show you their climate project. So their climate project here, it's at SpokaneClimateProject.org, talks about all of the stuff that's most important to the changes that are coming in the area with a great scientific basis. They have a great summary and understanding of how the snowfall and snowpack are likely to change in the region, impacts on stream flow, wildfires, and of course, the temperature and precipitation information that we regularly access on the channel. So although this is a city that's dealing with a big summer heat up, they have a very strong adaptation strategy for that. They're working on improving tree canopy in the area and making sure that they transition towards the resilient trees for the future. They're working on a water plan that takes into effect the fact that there is going to be more rainwater and less snowpack derived water sources in the area. They're very conscious of the need to do design around the urban heat island effect. So we're talking about a city of some size. We're talking about over 200,000 people, but we're talking about people who are preparing for a good future. And it's worth noting they're preparing for that good future in the context of being an agricultural capital in an area where we expect that agricultural production is going to increase. There is a reasonable argument to be made that wheat yields will increase around towards and beyond 2050 in this region, leading to increased economic activity in the region as a whole and allowing Spokane to grow. So they're preparing for a future with growth. They're preparing for a really good future. And they've got a good attitude. But it is big. Like I said, it's like 200,000 plus. So let's move over to another beautiful city, a little bit on the smaller side. Let's take a look at Wenatchee, Washington. And here, we'll go back and we'll zoom in on the plant hardiness moves so you get a better idea where Wenatchee is. So Spokane was over here by the Idaho border. Here, we're closer to the mountains where there is the concerns about power grid destabilization, actually. So here's Wenatchee. It's not huge. Right now, it's in an area where we have bordering Zone 7, Zone 6 winters. And if we look towards 2050, we see a little bit of an expansion of the Zone 7, but it's minor, very stable. Pacific Northwest, extremely stable winters across the entire region. Looking over at heat, let's go back to our contemporary and move in towards Wenatchee. There we go. Right now, this is a pretty cool summer area. You might expect to see 45 days a year over 86, 45 warm days a year. When we move up towards mid-century, you see they move into mint, which is 65 up to 60 days a year. Yeah, up to 60 days a year over 86. So you're talking about maybe an extra 2.5 weeks of summer here in Wenatchee. That is an extremely mild level of change, really very hopeful for preservation of trees, of mature plants, and of current ecosystems. So they are preparing for change on a level that I thought was just amazing. I want to show you this. This is the first time that I was looking around at what a city is doing, and I see a city that has a resiliency strategy. These are folks who have moved beyond mitigation towards accepting what's coming, looking towards the future, building the argument, and getting going. So this is the county where Wenatchee is located. It seems like many of the landowners in the county, rural landowners outside of the county, are also really into getting ready because like I said, we're looking at just an exceptionally mild level of change in terms of temperature. It's also pretty mild projected changes in precipitation. And I want to show you their visualizations here are so nice. They're concerned about wildfire, right? Because in any area in the West where you've got this heating, drying trend, we've already seen the wildfires get started. If you look, they're modeling for a low greenhouse gas scenario. Here's what we're talking about with RCP 4.5 and 8.5. So you have most likely and worst case modeling and visualizations that give you a very clear concept of what you're going to be getting into with your fire danger days. I think all throughout this report, which I'll have the link in the description, you can see what future conditions are going to be in the county at like a 5 square mile basis. It's extraordinary. And this is a great place. You know, if you want to get ready in a place that's very beautiful with like-minded people, very appealing, mild relative level of change. Not that it's not serious, but like you can see, they're working to get on top of it. We got a fighter here, you know? And I love the communities that are fighters, that really want to get going. There's another thing that I love, though, which are communities with great local food culture and fantastic water plants. And that's going to take us over to Walla Walla. So over here in Walla Walla, we're starting off contemporary data in agricultural zone 7. And you can see that in 2050, staying in zone 7, very little change in the location of the zone 6-7 margin nearby. Very mild winter. This is an excellent agricultural area. They grow a wide variety of food crops. They have a very rich local food culture. Looking at the summer heat up, which we've seen can be big in this region, right now Walla Walla is in that sort of mint. That means you can have up to 60 days over 86 a year. And I bet that you can guess we are seeing that transition over to more of the peach color, which means up to 90. So you're talking about a larger change. You're talking about maybe 4 additional weeks of heat, of days over 86 a year. Most of those are forecast to be well under 100 degrees. So what you're talking about here, they see a potential excellent extension of the growing season. And in this dry area, this extension of the growing season, the degree to which you could get expanded productivity for many, many crops in this large region is going to rely on water, right? So I want to show you another thing that I thought was just incredibly impressive was their strategic plan, their water strategic plan here. This is another community that has a fantastic grasp and is taking fantastic action on climate issues. Check it out. This is an enormous strategic plan. It's 217 pages of like pure power. This thing has, it doesn't pull any punches. It's completely actionable and it's very realistic about the size of the challenges that they got to get on top of. This degree of change here, they're building a bright future and they accept that it's in the context of very challenging conditions. I thought this was a wonderful visualization that they did here, showing how a lot of your winter precipitation in this region has been snowpack dominant. And when you look down by Walla Walla, you are looking at mixed rain and snow. You are looking at some contribution, significant, of snow to your watershed. But as we move towards mid-century and beyond, they expect it to be very much rain dominant. So that's going to change the hydrology of the region. There might be, for example, increased flooding, which is one of the major focuses of their water plan. So Walla Walla, if you want to look at a place where you have a great climate outlook, excellent pre-existing local food diversity and food culture, and an aggressive forward-looking water plan that not only looks at the science, envisions the future, and gets working on it, this is a strong community outlook right here. If I were personally going to pick a community from this video, I would want to get on the Walla Walla team because they've got everything that they need right there. And I love a strong agricultural community. But it's small, right? We're talking about 45,000 people. If that and Wenatchee are on the small side for you, we're going to go over to some bigger places now. We're going to start with the Tri-Cities area. So here we are checking out the Tri-Cities area on the USDA plant hardiness zone map. All we can see is Kennewick, but we know that Richland and Pasco are there too. We expect in this area in the inland Pacific Northwest, almost no change to the winters. We can certainly see that that is true for Kennewick. No move out of a very stable zone 7. The heat, though, can be a little bit of a problem. This is already the warmest part of the big agricultural area inland here As we look towards 2050 under our most likely climate future, we do see some of these darker patches appearing, meaning up to 120 days over 86 a year. This is a hot area. You know, it's hot now. It's going to be getting hotter and drier, but it also has some points in its favor. We're right on the Snake River here, highly rechargeable watershed, excellent level of baseline groundwater monitoring in this area. So although especially over here on this side of the river, we are expecting to see some substantial heat, 4 additional weeks of heat in the summer, it's not unlivable type forecast like we might see if we were looking at California's Central Valley, where the heat is going to be truly oppressive. If you need a place where you can buy a house, get a job, raise a family, the Tri-Cities area is going to have those things for you. However, I was not able to find a super clear, aggressive climate action plan for this area, not for any of the cities themselves or for the county. There's a lot of work going on, like I said, to monitor the groundwater, to assess and build water resilience. A lot of those practical things they are thinking about there, definitely. But I get the impression that climate might be more politically charged in the Tri-Cities region than in other parts of the inland Pacific Northwest. I do want to emphasize that the groundwater monitoring, which is the thing that is essential to the security of the positive agricultural outlook, appears to be very good. There might not be as much talk in this area about the likelihood of a hotter, drier future, but they're definitely getting ready for it. Now, to finish off our inland Pacific Northwest picks, let's head back to the mountains, check out Bend, Oregon. All right, so we've moved pretty far south, well down into Oregon as we're checking out Bend, a major city in inland Oregon and growing substantially. And the 2010 census, Bend had 78,000 people. 2020 census, it was up to 99,000 people. Greater metro area, about 200,000. This is a very beautiful town. A lot of the movement in, though, has been from retirees. I hear it can be kind of a hard town to find a job, and the housing is a little bit more expensive than some of the other cities we talked about. Looking towards 2050, we see a very unusual change here where the plant hardiness zone is actually dropping a little bit. You're moving from a marginal zone 7, zone 6 winter in Bend to getting to more of a true zone 6. And look what's going on down here. This is the snow park where you can go to ski to do some winter sports in Bend. So contemporary is small zone 5. Moving towards mid-century, it's getting bigger. This is one of the extremely few places where we see a nice outlook for winter sports to mid-century. It's very hopeful, very good for anyone who really enjoys that aspect of outdoor recreation. You are going to see fewer very cold days here like you are in anywhere else in the US, but you're going to have some stability of that zone 5, which allows for a little bit more snowpack to maintain. Really nice. As we look over to heat zones, Bend is traditionally very cool, but we do see pretty decent conservation of that summer cool. You'll see it stays entirely within the mint band. So although we were looking at maybe 2-3 weeks over 86 originally, we're still looking at under 45 days over 86 a year. Nice traditional cool summer, really, particularly when we take into account the degree of change that we see in many other mountain communities. And Bend is aware of climate. I haven't seen as much resiliency work. A lot of their climate action plan, which is very nice, very intelligent, very well researched, focuses on mitigation, on reducing the amount of greenhouse gases they emit. And that's important. We need to do that work to make our most likely climate future happen. And at the same time, we need to also be thinking about how are we going to make changes on the ground to get ready for the change that's coming. So I see their climate action plan as an excellent sign that they're starting to move into that future. And if you read the plan, you'll see that there is evidence that they're starting to begin resiliency planning in a very hopeful way. I think that that's another town with a great outlook. They do have wildfire risk, but because they're already starting to take action to mitigate the risk, it's not the sort of concern that we were walking into 10 years ago in California, where we really didn't have a public awareness or mitigation going on to reduce wildfire threats before they became extremely severe. I think that if we can sum this up, there are many communities in this region that are just incredibly on the ball when it comes to understanding and preparing for our climate future. Many of our agricultural communities here, they're looking at the potential for increased production, and they're doing what it takes to unlock that potential. There's a lot of very focused attention to the water future in the inland Pacific Northwest. It looks to me like there's a very reasonable chance they'll be able to do it too, because you have many highly rechargeable aquifers in the region, and you're not having as dramatic of a drying trend, particularly in Washington. The drying trend is pretty bad in Oregon, but particularly in Washington, if people focus on capture of rainwater, it's going to be a very solvable problem. It is worth saying that the level of attention that they're giving the problem, though, this water problem, it's worth it. If you're moving from a snowpack to a rain-dominated watershed, it's going to change the hydrology. It merits the level of attention that these communities are giving this problem, and it's good to see communities giving it some real attention. This is by far the greatest awareness in communication by governments that we've seen in any of the big three regions. These are the best climate plans that we've seen by far in any of the destination cities that we've looked at so far. It is worth noting, though, with all of the water plans, with all of the water action, this is a water limited region. This region can take in fewer people than, say, the northern Midwest, which is by far the least water limited of the big three regions. I do also want to emphasize again, I feel like maybe I didn't talk about it enough. Although they're getting ready for it, Inland Pacific Northwest has the highest level of wildfire danger for the big three destination regions. I hope, though, this has helped you get a balanced idea of some good destinations in the region if you're a person who's looking to move. This is a good time to prepare for the changes that are coming. And many of these communities, you can get ready with like-minded people in a region that's facing change head-on, more than any other region we've explored. Don't worry, though. Vermont, I recognize that you are on top of it. This is not excluding you from being a place that is ready. The cities, though, of the Pacific Northwest, by and large, they're really getting ready. These are good places where you could get ready too.